The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm Steven Zakash here with my co-host, Tulio Siragusa, and we have a special guest today who we'll introduce in a moment. So leadership is changing. For a long time, business success was often measured by speed, scale, efficiency, and financial performance. And those things, of course, still matter. But today's leaders are also being measured by something a little deeper: how they communicate, how they listen, how they build trust, and how they support people through complexity and growth. And really, this is what I like to say is capitalism maturing, kind of, So we're heading in the right direction, I think. A lot of kicking and screaming from folks along the way, but emotional intelligence and empathy are becoming core leadership capabilities, and especially in franchise systems and service-based businesses where success depends on people, relationships, consistency, and trust. And today we are exploring how emotional intelligence and empathy are the new standard for success. And we're going to talk about operations, franchise leadership, culture, communication, customer care, and how empathy can become a strength inside scalable systems. Tulio, introduce our special guest today.
It'll be my pleasure. Our guest today is... I lost my line.
Oh. Dramatic pause.
Roxanne Conrad. She's the chief.
I thought you were building up some emotion there, Tulio.
Wait a minute. Another name. Okay, our guest today is Roxanne Conrad. She's the Chief Operating Officer of Premium Service Brands as COO. Roxanne oversees the day-to-day operations of the entire franchise system, helping ensure consistency, efficiency, and support across multi-locations. She plays a key role in growth strategy, process improvement, innovation, and collaboration across the entire organization. Before joining Premium Service Brands, Roxanne held leadership roles across operations management, business development, marketing, and public relations. Today, she helps drive the growth and prosperity of Premium Service Brands while supporting a franchise system built around home services, customer experience, and franchise ownership success. Roxanne, welcome to the Bliss Business Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Roxanne, so today the topic's emotional intelligence and empathy and how they're the new standard for success. From your perspective as COO, why are these qualities so important in modern leadership?
Yeah, so I think emotional intelligence gets misunderstood a lot, actually, because people hear the word emotion in there and they assume it means soft leadership or avoiding accountability. But to me, it's actually the opposite. Emotional intelligence is understanding people well enough to hold the right accountability for them. So the best leaders understand who someone is at their core, not like surface level personal stuff, right? Not if they like dogs and long walks on the beach, but just how they naturally operate. What's their social battery? Are they energized people, or are they drained by constant interaction with people? Are they highly detailed? Are they more vision oriented? Are they patient, like kindergarten teacher kind of patient? Or should we keep them away from training the new hires, right? How do they solve problems? So that matters because leadership isn't about forcing everyone into the same mold. It's about putting people in the right positions so that they can succeed naturally while still driving performance. And I'll be honest, perfectly honest, no one in this organization would describe me as a touchy-feely kind of leader. In fact, most would probably say I stay very far away from feelings. But empathy and sympathy are not the same thing. So sympathy, changes the standards that we hold people accountable to because of how we feel about them. But empathy and having emotional intelligence helps you understand where someone is coming from so that you can lead them more effectively without lowering the expectations for them or your organization.
So for a lot of people, especially in the role of a COO. You know, the role of operations can sometimes be viewed as systems and processes, logistics, metrics, efficiency, and all that is true. But how does like empathy and emotional intelligence show up in day-to-day operational leadership in a practical way? How does that show up?
Yeah, so I think operations is ultimately about people executing consistently, right? So I think that empathy and emotional intelligence show up a lot more than people realize. Yes, to your point, there are systems, there's KPIs, there's processes, there's an accountability, but behind all of the operational metrics is still a human being that's making decisions and communicating and hopefully solving problems and also interacting with customers or franchisees. And emotional intelligence shows up in understanding how those different people operate best. So some people need very, very direct communication style, right? I'm like, hit me between the eyes with it. But some need some more context. This is why we do it this way. Some people are highly detailed, and then, you know, some people just really want to have kind of the overall big picture. I think great operational leaders understand how to lead the person and not just the process. And I think that empathy inside of that is understanding where someone is coming from, right? Who they are at their core before trying to solve the issue. So sometimes what appears like a performance problem is actually a clarity problem. They don't understand what we're trying to accomplish. Sometimes it's training, sometimes it's role fit. Sometimes the person is simply operating outside of their natural strengths, and we need to have a conversation around that. So I spend a lot of time in thinking about the strengths in a really practical way, right? Do the people speak first in meetings, or do they sit back and absorb? Do they want to own an outcome, or would they rather follow a defined process? In a room or even a virtual one, right? Who gets deferred to for certain topics? Who's looking at who for the answer? And if you understand those things, I think that you can place the people in the right positions where they can succeed more naturally. And I think that's where we have to go beyond the systems and the process and the metrics. Those are the people that are following them, and making sure that we understand who those people are is how empathy and emotionally intelligence show up.
You know, you mentioned something about how you like communication yourself. And so one of the things that I think we talk about a little bit on here is, why is it important for, you know, executives to have self-awareness about those kind of things? What do you think?
Well, so blind spots scale as your authority scales, right? The higher you go up in leadership, the more accountable you are to things, the more your impact of your communication style, your reactions, the decisions that you make, those patterns on how you make those decisions, the more impact that has on the entire organization at large. So self-awareness is absolutely crucial for executives, because if you understand how you naturally lead, and where that leadership style can become a weakness if you're not careful, where you have your blind spots if you're not careful, the more impactful you can be. The more aware you are means the more opportunity you have to kind of lean in and or hire to your weaknesses, right? To make sure that the organization is run in a more diverse manner, catering to all styles of communication. So I'll give you an example. I'm super operationally driven, right? COO, of course, that tracks. I move very quickly. I like clarity and execution. I want answer, I want to go, and I want it done. But I'm self-aware enough to know that not everybody processes information at that speed or in that style. Some people like a little bit more context. They need a little bit more processing time. If I go at my speed at that level of directness that I prefer in everyone, I'm going to run people over. So I have to be conscious of that and give some people enough time to process or to think through things, give them time for what we're working towards. Otherwise, I'm going to come across as, and I have many times, I'm sure, abrasive and knocking people down and overbearing. So I have to be very conscious of who I am. And I think that's the answer that I'm trying to say, I guess, is that executives have to be more conscious of who they are so that they're not implementing their personality down and that we're aware of who we are and who we're speaking to be able to drive the best outcome for everyone that we're leading.
Yeah, I like that phrase of implementing your personality. You don't want to be like, I always say, like, if you've got issues, you do not, especially as COO, because you could systemize these issues in a lot of ways, right? So it's that self-awareness is just so important to this process and this topic of empathy, just because it's kind of the first thing you really need to be aware of when you're trying to communicate with people or when you're trying to empathize with people, is that, hey, this is how you're coming on. Right? Or this is an issue that you have. Make sure we're not going to be systemizing Steve's issues throughout the.
That's right.
What you said, Roxanne, resonates so much. I mean, you were talking about sometimes you see things so quickly, you have the answer, and it can come across abrasive when it's just a desire to move forward. For me, what helped me a lot is as I moved into the self-management environment, I had to step back and learn to just let people get there, right? And sometimes you're watching and you're like, it's so easy. Come on. And you got to just bite your lip and let people get there. It takes tremendous discipline too. That self-awareness will help you also with discipline, because sometimes you have to just let people get there.
Well,
but it's hard. It's so simple. Don't you see it?
When they get there themselves, well, first of all, that's right? True leadership is when they're learning it for themselves and you're no longer teaching them. I mean, you're now leading them. Yeah. And you get out of training and you get really into leadership. And so I couldn't agree more that the best moment of my day is when somebody has that aha moment right in front of me.
It takes longer to get there, but eventually it pays off, because then the speed of how things get done is everybody's operating at the level.
That's right.
In the process, you're like, oh my gosh, just bite your lip.
No, but you have to be aware of your voice and the power that plays in a situation to where you just, I'm just going to step back and let them figure it out. And, I'd say probably 9 times out of 10, they'll get there in some point. But, and that's, like you said, that's, if you want to teach, that's kind of the way you got to do it sometimes.
That's right.
And sometimes being of service is not giving the answer. Most of the time it isn't. It's having compassion enough to let someone struggle on their way there, and just being patient with their struggle and guiding them and shadow leading them if you can. But, so from an emotional intelligence perspective and empathy perspective, do you find yourself tapping into that compassion often? Where does that show up, and how can other leaders adapt that, when necessary, from your experience?
Yeah, I would say absolutely, right? I think that compassion in leadership is really actually more about, hey, I care enough about you to be honest with you in some of those crucial conversations, right? It's providing clarity, it's providing consistency. It's not avoiding the hard conversations just because they're uncomfortable. That's not compassion. People actually feel safer when the expectations are clear, when they know that you're going to tell them if they're doing a good job, if they need some work, if they need some coaching. If there's confusion, that creates stress. And stress is never great for performance. It's never great for feeling like you're in the right place. But clarity creates confidence. So I think that compassion is really saying, hey, I understand who you are. I understand how you work best. I'm still going to hold you accountable because I think you're capable of it.
Yeah. I always say, like, clarity is kind of a form of kindness. It can be for people, because, I love that we've got COO on here, because from a marketing company standpoint, we're always like trying to get our clients to really embrace some things operationally that are really important, because we know, like, that lifetime customer value, it can really be, it really comes down to a lot of times some of that customer experience. And so that's really why we started this this conversation on our podcast about what we call Bliss, and that's build love into scalable systems. It's about this: how can we systemize love, compassion, care, empathy, on scale, so that the customers and the employees, and everybody kind of feels that in some way, because we know that's where, from a marketing standpoint, that's what makes our job easier, is when we can get that emotional connection. And you can't, you know, you can talk the talk, but we really need companies to walk the walk from that kind of viewpoint in order to build that real authentic relationship with companies. We talk systems a lot on here, and I love it when we've got franchises on here, so that we can talk about how do you build systems that can create, you know, that consistency and efficiency while still supporting the human beings inside the system.
Yeah, so I couldn't agree more. And I'm an operations person, so I love me some systems and process. SOPs, they're my jam, right? I think sometimes those systems get kind of a bad reputation because people associate them with rigidity, right? It's A to B to C to D. There's no flexibility inside of it. But truly, the best systems are what reduce emotional friction. So clear processes remove uncertainty. And remember, you know, I was just kind of talking about it. Uncertainty is stress. And if we build systems, really what we're trying to do is remove the stress. We're trying to reduce the stress. And I think that that's what great systems and process do, is they alleviate stress. And that helps create more confidence in people, because they know what the outcome is supposed to be, and they know what it takes to get there. So they know what good looks like. We use that phrase around here at PSB a lot. What does good look like? And I think that process and systems help provide the structure and the framework for what good looks like, which reduces stress. And especially in franchising. I mean, in franchising, consistency matters so much. But consistency doesn't just mean turning people into robots. It means creating enough structure that franchise owners or employees, teams, they can focus their energy on growth and customer experience and leadership, instead of constantly having to reinvent the wheel and you know, that hamster just kind of spinning at all times. So I think the goal is never really to build systems that control people. It's to build systems that support people and allow them to work on the things that really matter and really provide value, while knowing that there's a framework there that's supporting what good looks like, and they just need to follow it to get to good.
Yeah, I like that. You want your systems to support your people. And the way we kind of put it is, you know, when we're trying to bring that empathy into the system, is how we can have these ways that it can prompt that from people, you know, in a systematic way, because, you know, you'll get you're looking for those great franchise owners, right? That have something, and it's like, what is that one thing that they've got that's really great? And if you can kind of help prompt that from them and bring out more of that in your systems, I mean, you have this huge opportunity as CEO to really have a ripple effect on a lot of lives, on all these different businesses, on all these and their families and your customers' families. So it's
no pressure.
Yeah, no pressure on any of this. But that's the part, like you said, if you want to geek out on systems, like, it's like, hey, no, there's a lot of, like you said, clarity can be like this, you know, this ability to help your people. But there's a lot of ways you can really have this major effect at scale because of these systems, when you're kind of thinking about, yeah, how can we build, you know, something that's more empathetic, or yeah.
And you know, the difference is, at the end of the day, it's just accomplishing a transaction. But just getting a transaction accomplished can be very cold and clinical. Just totally sucks the life out of you, because you just do it as a chore. Or you can elevate it where the transaction meets a need at the same time. That's where really empathy gets built into it, where you're now creating an experience you want people to have by fulfilling that transaction, whether it's learning or growing or collaborating or something that fulfills them personally. And I think if you can balance that, then you've cracked the code, create an environment people feel inspired to fulfill the transaction. Because at the end of the day, yeah, we got to get a bunch of stuff done, and they have to be done in a way that's systemized, but it doesn't have to feel cold and compliance driven.
That's right.
All right, we've got a couple audience questions. Let's pull one of those up here. Let's see what. All right. How do you build a strong sense of community and belonging among franchise owners who are spread out all over the country?
Oh, I love that question. So a couple of different ways. First and foremost, technology helps. So we have our owners into group chats that allows them to interact real time, live with each other. And quite honestly, we've built wonderful cultures in our brands. One of the things that we talk about when an owner starts with us, and I'm talking about their live week of training, we tell them that yes, they're going to be extremely dependent on us, the franchisor, in the very, very beginning. They're going to be extraordinarily dependent on their launch coach for answers to certain things. But over time, the value of the franchise isn't really us. Of course it is. Of course, we're going to provide a lot of systems and support and all of that. But the value is the other owners. So we're encouraging the owner-to-owner relationships immediately. And I think that that's helped us really build out really strong culture within the brands where owners are encouraged on a regular basis to reach out to each other and speak to each other and ask questions and help. Because quite honestly, it doesn't matter how many launch coaches, brand leaders, FBCs I have, there's 80 more owners than there are a coach. And they're going to probably be able to get to another owner faster than one of us will. And I think that provides a really strong way for owners to interact. And then we also have peer groups that we allow them to interact with. And we also have our franchise advisory councils, which are, elected within the franchise system that meet regularly with their brand president. So we provide a lot of opportunities and channels for the owners to interact with us and other owners, which creates a really good positive feedback loop.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to argue against another owner bringing up a point because that's, thinking about it empathetically. They've been there, they've been through all this, and they're able to provide some expertise that you might have in your systems and things like that. But it's just sometimes sinks in until it's some other owner kind of saying, hey, yeah, do this. This is what I found.
Yeah, it's a wonderful structure. There are non-franchise companies who pay top dollars to be part of those peer groups, mastermind circles, and things of that sort to be able to get access to
so
their
underrated.
And so the fact that it's built in, that you guys have that built in, I don't know how many owners realize that is actually a benefit that's very educational, to get access to and to be supported that way. It's pretty phenomenal to have that.
All right. We got another audience question. Let's see this. It's from a LinkedIn user. How can a leader tell the difference between an employee who is genuinely overwhelmed and needs support versus someone who is just trying to avoid accountability?
Good one.
Yeah, that is a great question.
That is a great question.
So I like to ask a lot of questions when I'm trying to discern whether or not, to your point, it's an employee who truly feels overwhelmed or maybe they're avoiding some things. And so what I'm trying to glean by asking certain questions is, are they the right person skill set wise and they're lacking motivation? Or are they lacking some skills, or are they lacking some information that allows them to do their job in an effective manner? So an example would be, I'm going to ask them questions about how they would resolve their own issues. So rather than tell them the answer, if they're feeling overwhelmed, I might say, well, what would help? If you were me, what could I do to help support you? What is it that you feel like you would need? And that's going to probably tell me one of two things. They're either going to say, well, I need more training, or we need more help on the team. And then I might start to go into some KPIs, right? Like I'm going to ask them, what does good look like? And I guess it all kind of depends on the role, but I'm going to want to know, what standard they're holding themselves accountable to. And does it match the standard that we're holding everybody else accountable to? Because that will also tell me something. It'll tell me if they maybe don't have the skill sets to keep up, Or again, if maybe they're just lacking the motivation to do it. So I'm going to say, dig in and ask a lot of questions, and see how they would solve their own problem. And that might tell you if it's a skill set or a communications issue, or again, if it's a motivation issue.
Amazing. That's a tough one.
Yes.
We're dissecting basically, is it fear of failure? Is it lack of motivation? Is it just a victim consciousness where they don't take accountability for anything? So much going on there, so complex.
And sometimes what you find too is it's not necessarily even a lack of motivation around the company or themselves. Sometimes it's they're bored. If they're passionate about something else, so you might find that they're not in the right seat because they might be passionate about other things. That's always a tough one, but it's there, and you do uncover that from time to time.
Yeah, so true. So now let's talk about purpose a little bit. It's a premium service brand. You guys operate in the home services business. So franchise owners and their teams, they're entering people's homes and serving customers, and in most cases, a moment of need, or in some cases, even an emergency. The company says that customer satisfaction is key to its success, and emphasizes reliable service and unforgettable customer service experience. How does empathy influence the way you think about customer experience in a service-based franchise system like this?
Yeah, so I think in home services especially, right, customers are inviting you into their personal space. This, like you said, this is their home. And usually in some of our brands, it's during moments of stress, right? Something is broken, they need something fixed, they can't get out of their garage, pipe burst, something is not working properly. Heck, even painting, an exterior painting, like this is not something somebody wants to drop $10,000 on just because they want a different color of a house. Usually it's because the paint is eroding, it's chipping, etc. So these are kind of during moments of stress. Nobody calls a home service company because today's the best day of their life, right? So we're getting them in a very particular time in their lives and in their personal space. So empathy becomes incredibly important. Consumers want communication. When somebody is coming into their home, they want to know, and they want reliability. They want to know when you're coming. They want to know what you're going to do when you get there. They want to feel very respected. They want to know that you're respecting their home and their family and their lives. And I think a lot of customer satisfaction is emotional, right? So we try and keep the feelings out of things in operations, but in home services and owning one of these brands, customer satisfaction is very, very emotional. Does that customer feel heard? Did you understand what they were trying to accomplish? Did they feel informed? Even from a pricing perspective, did they feel that the pricing was transparent and fair? Did they trust the people in their home? Those are all incredibly important. So I think that operational consistency absolutely matters, but empathy is what turns that into a great experience for the customer. And I think that's how those two marry each other inside of a franchise operation.
Yeah. I'm just curious, do you guys go and train or coach the operators on how to show up in a way that's empathetic and understanding? Is there a program, not just for the owner, but the people actually that do the work? How do they get supported to show up properly? Yeah,
so that's all part of our training, and also our operations manuals. When owners come in each brand, they kind of have their own operations manuals and how to show up at the customer's home, what to look like, where to park, how to ask for certain things, right? Yard signs are really great for us. People want to advertise their services in their business, but you don't just put something in somebody's yard without asking, right? So these are all the things that we provide to our owners as part of the onboarding and training and the ongoing operations manuals, is the training on how to do that, and sales techniques and how to overcome objections without being ruthless, right? So these are all part of the trainings that we provide our owners.
I like that you kind of went through that empathetic process of what your customer's going through, right? They're, whatever service they're asking for. They're going through some kind of process. And to me, when we talk about like a purpose of your company, it's really key to get everyone kind of understanding that sort of empathetic thing that, hey, ultimately, this is what the customer is going through. So anytime you have that point of contact from anyone or anyone doing their job, like you said, if they're bored or lacking motivation, this helps them kind of understand a little bit of the motivation is like, hey, this person, maybe they're going through it, just a really traumatic experience, something just happened at the house, all of that. And you're stepping in and this is how you're impacting their lives, right? Once you kind of articulate that internally, people kind of, once they get that, that's, you hope operationally that comes out and everybody kind of understands that. Because externally, like when we're doing marketing, we love that you're on the same page of this. We can tell a great story about this person, what they're going through and how you're able to meet them, emotionally and have that really great customer experience. I mean, it's such a huge part of culture is that purpose and embedding that people don't understand. And so just thinking about that a little bit from a systems standpoint, can you kind of audit a business, by your purpose or by that emotional connection you're trying to build? And you kind of said yes, in a way, because you've got like the trainings and things like that, right? There's probably something you can continually kind of do is audit that business by that customer experience, right?
Right.
Yeah. So thinking about that, that's really part of building a culture. The kind of the right way is doing that. And I know, from operations, that's kind of key, is making sure that you're bringing all these people together and building that culture of innovation and collaboration, and maintaining, kind of the high standards across the organization. But how do you build that culture of innovation and collaboration while maintaining the standards, do you think? Is it kind of going through that kind of process?
I think that culture is really built through consistency. What are, the things that we are trying to achieve collectively? How do we reward that? How do we reinforce it? How do we model that every day? To encourage innovation and collaboration, you really have to balance a safe space for ideas and thoughts with accountability. People have to feel safe enough to communicate honestly, bring ideas forward, challenge things productively, but they also need clear standards, right? We're in a franchise system. We talked about chaos a little early on before the show, and I said I'm the queen of chaos, but we're in franchising, so you can't have chaos everywhere, right? In franchising, you have to have some clear standards. And so I think one thing that I've learned is that people are actually far more comfortable in accountable environments where there's transparency and clarity, when they understand what the expectations are, that they're very transparent and fair, and then they feel much more free to provide you with their thoughts, ideas, tell you things that they've tried that worked, maybe things that they've tried that didn't work, and know that as long as it's within the framework of what we're trying to get to, that all's fair, and that feedback loop is really appreciated. And also sometimes saying thank you. I mean, letting people know when they've delivered communication to you, even if it's an uncomfortable conversation, just simply saying thank you and meaning it.
Especially if it's an uncomfortable conversation, yes. If you're able to get through. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Thank you for letting me know that. We'll look into it. Or thank you for explaining to me why that was done. I mean, I think those are all things that provide that safe space, and allow for that collaboration and allow people to innovate within, a set standards of their brand. And I think that's how you end up fostering that culture, but while maintaining high standards so that, chaos doesn't ensue.
Is that what a healthy franchise culture looks like? It's one that's got like structure, but also that psychological safety you kind of described, right? To be able to work around the structure, within the structure.
Yes. People not operating in fear, people feeling comfortable asking questions, sharing feedback, identifying problems even. Obviously, knowing who they are and their communication style, they might speak about the problem in a different way. But again, go back to that emotional intelligence aspect. Know who the person is that's talking and understand how they communicate, so you can really kind of dive into what are they really telling me. And I think the strongest franchise systems do create kind of that alignment without making owners feel disconnected. And it's a tough balance for sure, but I do think that that's what a healthy franchise system looks like. We're listening to feedback, and we're creating a feedback loop, and we're allowing feedback. And then owners aren't operating in fear.
So on the show, we ask the question that's of everyone who comes on here is kind of some form of this. It's really talking about how, care, compassion, empathy, how these things show up in business. What role should love play in business, do you think?
Love's probably not the one that I'm the most comfortable with, that word. But I don't do feelings. But for me, it shows up in preparation, in thoughtfulness, in clarity, in transparency. In franchising, it's got to be in responsiveness, right? How quickly are we to respond to the needs of our owners? And then probably the most important thing of all, in follow through, right? If you say you're going to do something, we've got to execute on and do it. I care enough, I love enough to make sure that people have the tools, the information, the support that they need to succeed. I care enough to be honest with people, right? Instead of avoiding difficult conversations, I'm going to have the difficult conversation because I care and I want them to be their best and I want them to be in the right role. And I want our owners to have the right people in the right role that are supporting them, because, I have a responsibility to our owners. Care enough to build systems that reduce that stress and confusion, remove friction, support people in their roles. And then again, like I said, I'm not the most overly emotional person, but I do think that understanding people deeply and just creating those safe environments where they can perform confidently is one of the strongest forms of leadership. And I think that's where the love should sit.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned the follow through. We don't talk about it enough, because I think our first show was on resentment and how that can kind of build if you don't do something like follow through on what was, and especially from a leadership standpoint, right? If you're, you have to kind of follow through on these things or you build that resentment. So it is this form of love that, in all of our answers when we ask this question, I don't think someone's brought up follow through as a form of that kind of compassion. But it is a big one. All right. So if you could say one thing for people to take away from this show today, and try and implement into their business or their franchise, just one quick thing they could do this week, what would you say that would be?
Ask questions. Ask as many questions as you possibly can. I think we just in general, our culture, and I don't mean franchising, I mean just our culture in general, the world's culture, we've become very operationally focused. We're very quick to give our opinions, quick to have an answer. But I think that the best leadership and the best business owners, the best founders are the ones that don't hear an issue and go immediately into fixer mode, but try and understand why it happened, how it happened, the context, the root issue, and then asking a bunch of questions. So I think curiosity is one of the most underrated leadership skills there is. I think if we can stay open-minded and assume that there's always more to learn and there's always something we don't know yet, then we set ourselves up to be the best leaders we can be.
Nice. Roxanne, it's been great to have you. How can people find you, reach out, learn more about premium service brands? What's the best way to do that?
Yes, so you can learn more about premium service brands at premiumservicebrands.com. We're also active on LinkedIn, as am I. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to reach out. But we're focused on helping franchise owners grow strong businesses And we really genuinely care about supporting people and their performance in their businesses.
Roxanne, thanks for coming on the show. That was a great conversation. And thank you to our listeners too. Great questions. Really thinking about those last couple of answers you gave too. I think that curiosity it's really important. And the way you kind of have a foundation for that curiosity is to be humble, to, be open. And so be open, ask questions, be curious. Don't always, give an answer because you may learn a lot in the process. So thank you everyone for joining us on the Bliss Business Podcast, and we'll see you next time.